Good evening. I'm calling to order this Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, July 25th, 2017. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Metcalf? Here. Commissioner Bundy? Here. Commissioner Chase?
Here.
Commissioner Friedman?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Thank you. We will now open the meeting to public comment on anything that is not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone who's going to speak tonight? Looks like there is. So you have 3 minutes, Patty Stolier, and please go ahead.
Hello. Okay. I just want to say that on August 16th, the third Wednesday of August, the third Wednesday speaker series will be focused on lily pad and the presentation on ADU and JADU. So it's open to the whole public, and it's at 1 o'clock until 2:30 at the CMPA Community Room.
Thank you. Right down the street. Thank you, Patty. Anybody else with anything on an item not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, then we will close the public comment section of this agenda. We will go right to our continued hearing tonight. This is the budget in renovation. This is a continued public hearing to consider possible recommendation to adopt resolution approving a conditional use permit PL-2017-0092, major design review 15-009, a sign permit PL-2017-0093 for renovation and major modifications to the Budget Inn located at 706 Meadowsweet Drive. We had asked the applicant to return with some modifications, and planner Sean Kennings is going to introduce the item.
Chair, members of the commission, hi, I'm Sean Kennings, contract planner to the town. I was here May 9th for the first hearing. As you said, this is continued hearing for the Budget Inn at 706 Meadowsweet, which will be rebranded as the Palms. Just a quick background, the project location between Casa, Buena Drive and Meadowsweet near the Tamalpais Highway 101 interchange, medical offices at 81 and I think 721, Casa Buena on either side, residential multifamily to the south, and the town center to the north across Tamalpais Drive. The existing project conditions, currently it's 25% FAR, 6,400 square feet, although there are several garages in buildings A and B that aren't counted nominally towards FAR. So the proposed FAR using basically the same footprint would be 34% FAR at 7,900 square feet for a max of about 34%. Current setbacks, front and rear, 20 feet. Each building, Building A, which is the east building, Building B, which is the west building, encroach into the setbacks. Building A encroaches into the rear setback a little bit, and Building B encroaches into the front setback, and those are current conditions. Currently it conforms to side setbacks. Current height of the building, well, the proposed would be 27.9. For Building A, that would be the taller two-story building. The allowed in this district is 35 feet. Parking right now, there's 18 to 21 sort of unstriped spaces. There are some striped and some unstriped. The proposed has 23 total per the code, 180A space, 7 compact as allowed. And then previously we discussed they have 6 what they call hybrid spaces. We're going to call them modified as to not confuse with hybrid cars, but these 6 spaces are the correct width and a couple inches short of the the code depth, but staff has determined that the intent of those spaces is to meet a standard space, so we believe they have enough parking on site. It's exempt from CEQA because it's the replacement of existing commercial structure. And there's a FEMA floodproofing condition on the property. Its base flood elevation is 10 feet. Per the FEMA designation, Corte Madera's code asks for 1 additional foot, which would require an 11-foot base flood elevation for your structures. Currently, Building A, Building B, and Building C are all below that 11-foot flood proofing requirement. So the project is entailing what's called dry and wet flood proofing. Dry flood proofing is on Building A, which is a flood wall with flood-proofed doors and flood proofing along the side and rear walls. Building B and C is what's called wet flood proofing, which has a crawl space underneath the finished floor, which has vents that allow the flood waters to go through the building. And that's in the last sheet of your plan set. So at the May 9th hearing, the Planning Commission reviewed the project and had several comments. Aside from the conditional use permit requirement, which the Commission discussed that they could potentially make the findings, the Commission asked the applicant to come back and fix the design and asked for essentially seven things. First off was fix labeling issues on the plan set. There were errors in directional location and other places on the plan set. They asked for why the color scheme that was chosen at the time, which was a very sort of vibrant blue, why that was the preferred scheme, and if it wasn't the preferred scheme, to show and really explain what those color choices would be. And they asked that the applicant provide color on the buildings to show really what those colors would look like in space, in the daylight, which they have done, and we'll get into that a little bit later. They asked for better facade or roof articulation, explain how the roof lines could be modified, and look into how solar panels can be integrated into the building. The Commission asked for structural engineer analysis of the proposed remodel. Can it really be a functional remodel? What amount of existing walls would remain, and what would be proposed, and what would be the ratio? It was also a request about how the flood proofing will work and whether or not dry and wet flood proofing is really the preferred method. Are there alternatives? Can you raise the buildings? And so on and so forth. They asked for a modification of the freestanding design, freestanding sign, to make it more compatible with the building itself and with Corte Madera as a whole, and asked for finally landscape plan revisions and lighting fixtures with lumens. So in the applicant's June response, we did in fact get a modified color scheme. You will see in your plan set there are 2 color schemes, option 1, which is a warmer brown and gray color scheme, and option 2, which is more of a cooler blue and gray color scheme. They eliminated some of the tile mosaics that were on the north and south elevations and sort of reoriented those to the stairwells on Building A. They did provide a modified roof profile with ridges, but did not indicate what a solar panel looked like, although they did indicate in the plans that they would build the structure to hold solar panels. They revised Building A's elevations to show compliance with the flood proofing in the rear. If you recall, they previously had windows that extended below that flood proofing line. They redesigned the freestanding sign, located it on the northwest side of the property as opposed to the northeast side of the property. They lowered it about 5 feet and stripped it of some of its eccentric sort of components, although it is the same color as originally proposed. They did prepare a report by the structural engineer indicating that the proposed remodel is feasible. And they did provide some correspondence from their flood-proofing consultant about why the flood-proofing is appropriate. So to quickly orient you through the site, Building A is to the lower half here, Building B here. Building A is the two-story building, 23 parking spaces. An ADA room here and here in Building A and B. Here's their proposed landscaping materials. No changes to the landscape plan, but this is just the indicative of what they're proposing. Here's the lighting materials that was requested. And here's the proposed revised elevation to Building A. You can see here now the mosaic tiles are here in the stairwells, and they have a little bit of an articulation in the roof profile on the north and south elevation. In the plan set, they indicate the height of the flood proofing wall is a little bit higher to meet the 11-foot FEMA requirement and Corte Madera requirement. This would be the rear of Building A. You can see this is sort of the flood proofing in the rear. The windows are now sort of stubby as opposed to extending beyond the flood proofing. This would be north and south elevation. You can see that the mosaics are removed from this north and south component. And here's the roof profile with the articulation. Building B has a similar little jog in the roof line. Other than that, there's not much modifications to Building B. They did provide sort of these stucco elements on the back. And here's their new sort of roof line. So getting to the heart of the matter, here's the color scheme. This is option one. I'm not exactly sure if this is their preferred option, but staff believes that this option one has a little bit more of a warmer tone, sort of more compatible with other structures in the area. It's got kind of a brownish appeal on the north and south elevations, internal courtyard, and kind of a gray-blue for Building C and in the rear. Again, here you can see that. And here's the roofline articulation. Here's the new sign, sort of a stubbier sign than the original freestanding sign. This would be option two. It's more of a gray-blue cooler scheme, but it's staff's opinion a little bit monotone. If you note that the roof lines or the roof paints are different in the two schemes. Option two is kind of a blue. Option one is kind of a brown. And here's the south and east elevations of option two. Here's sort of an illustrative view from Casa Buena looking into the site. You can see sort of this brown facade on either side extends into the courtyard. Here's the revised plan. Freestanding sign here is located now in this sort of boulder mass where it used to be located right here in this planting strip. And again, this is option two. So for reference, option one, option two, option one, option two. Again, here's that south elevation for Meadowsweet, option one, with the brown and kind of gray scheme, and option two with more of a blue and gray scheme. Again, these are the two variations of the design. So you asked the applicant to provide sort of what the colors look like in the natural setting. I believe this is the brown color that you see here in option one. I believe the applicant will make a presentation so they can speak to the actual color choices. This is the warm color tones. I believe, too, that the applicant is suggesting that these are the combinations of the different colors as you see them in some of these areas, in some of these areas, in some of these areas, but not to suggest that this is a striping pattern that would be on this building. So this would be the warm color scheme for option one. This is the cooler blue color scheme for option two. I'm assuming that this color here on this building is supposed to be representative of this facade. But again, the applicant can speak to that. And again, this is the cooler version. This is the warmer version. And finally, here's their revised sign. It's about 10 feet tall, And it's located here in these boulders, which is in this northwest corner. So again, we have to make the findings for the conditional use permit, for the design review, and for the sign permit findings. Now, I recognize that you're going to have some questions regarding some of the specifics of the request that you made. I think we would, as staff, can answer your questions. And then after that, I think the applicant will make a presentation.
Thank you, Sean. So at the commission here, who has questions for staff? Phyllis,
In the beginning of your presentation.
would you check your microphone, please? Yes.
In the beginning of your presentation, when you were talking about the FAR, you brought up something about the garages. And I was wondering, you said that they're not counted, and does that mean they're not going to be used, or?
Well, so in the existing structure, if you were to count the garages as living space, then the existing FAR is higher than 27%. It's closer to like 39%. But because those garages are not technically living or habitable space, they're not counted as FAR. So the actual FAR of the building is 27%. But the remodel doesn't change the footprint. It's basically, and that's the reason for the conditional use permit. So right now, the number of units, I believe, is 18, and they're asking for, I think, 4 additional units. So the conditional use permit is to allow the expansion, so to speak, of the hotel, even though it's within the same footprint.
And will the garages be used as garages?
There will be no more garages.
No more garages, okay. That's what I want to clarify. That was
All
it.
right, thank you, Phyllis. Dr. Bundy?
Yeah, Sean, is there any provision for electric charging stations for electric vehicles? And is one ADA space acceptable for 22 units?
I believe the one space is the requirement for ADA, but I don't believe there are any electric charging, at least as presented. But I'm assuming the applicant can answer that question.
All right, thank you. That's it, Dr. Bundy? All right. Jennifer?
I don't have any questions.
All right.
So my question is going back to the handicap spaces. There are 3 handicap units that they've designated on the plans. So when you're calling for that many usable units, if you can't provide that many handicap spaces, is there any condition in the code or anything that addresses that? Do you understand what I'm saying?
So the last part, your question was, say it again.
So basically, if there's 3 handicap rooms,
I
but
get-
only 1 handicap
Sure.
parking space, is there somewhere in the zoning ordinance or code that addresses that lapse of coverage, basically?
No, not in the zoning code. It wouldn't address the lapse in the coverage. I think the applicant would be best to speak to why they're proposing or the requirements for the ADA units as compared to the ADA spaces and the mismatch that's resulting. I'm not sure I can answer that. They have one obviously designated ADA space. Other spaces may obviously be used if they're handicap and are using the other units, but I'm not sure if there's a requirement in the code, definitely not in our zoning code, but in the building code, that's something that would likely be done at the time of building permit submittal, where that requirement would be looked at by our building official, and that we would understand whether or not there's a requirement for more ADA spaces.
Okay, thank you for exploring that with me.
Yeah.
All right. So, I don't have any questions for staff. I just would like to point out that you accurately provided a list of things we requested. Some have not all been fulfilled, but it is time for the applicant to stand up and make their presentation. Who's going to speak for the applicant tonight? We have to have somebody make sure that microphone is on, so.
There?
There you go.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Sam David. I'm one of the owner of the property. Just to address a couple of comments we heard. So the charging station will be there. I think it's not part of the plan but we are using it at most of our other properties. So if we can, you can definitely make that as a conditions if that's required. And to answer questions about why there are more handicap units versus parking, a lot of our guests, elderly guests who may have one or the other disability where parking is not a major issue, but to have a units where they can function and move around with the units, and that's what they request or ask for, and that's the reason why we usually go over and beyond what the requirements are on the units, on ADA units. Thank you.
Not yet. We'll ask later, yeah. I'll ask you to hold your question until we're done. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
Patrick Moore, architect. Apologize for being late. And we are here for the second time to show you the changes that we've done to the buildings in terms of the roof. The levels of the roof have changed, and the colors also. And we have tried to clarify everything that we could that planning requested from us. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you have now.
All right, so there's nothing else you really want to present other than just to say that the plans are the presentation of the changes, and you have, beyond that, you just want us to enter into questions with you to clarify what we have for questions regarding these changes. So you haven't got anything you want to throw up on the screen for us or describe?
The main subject is the colors. The colors, we try to replicate the colors that we selected, which we have samples here on the computer, trying to use all the programs that we have, but no color comes close to what the real thing. And in order to replicate the real colors, you need to use a very expensive program, like the ones they use down in Silicon Valley too for those expensive things. So the best we could do is paint the real walls with the actual colors that we selected from the samples that we can pass around. And Kavya is, from my office, is the person that has worked on the colors, preparing the elevations with the colors for options 1 and 2. And Kavya, you want to pass them around? You want to speak about the colors first? All right, so I'll introduce Kavya.
Okay.
And she will tell you about options 1 and 2, which are two palettes of colors that are almost similar, but one is considered a cool one and the other one is a warm one. So, here you go, Kavya.
Hello, everyone. A very good evening. So, since the last hearing, we concluded that the colors that we...
One question. Would you please state your name, please?
I'm Kavya. Kavya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, sorry about that. So, since the last hearing, we concluded that the colors were a bit overpowering, so we wanted to bring to you two options, palette 1 and 2. But let me talk more about the option 1. So option 1 is a bit of a warm tone that we, wait, let me pass on the colors to you. So the option 1 is a little bit warmer with prominent colors like green and grays that to me represent the greenery around, at the same time can relate to the surrounding buildings there. And also there is a bit of a pop of a color so that, it's right at the exit to the freeway. So the building is more welcoming to people who enter through the exit. And
Which one is option 1?
yes, I have, yeah. The one we're looking at would be option 1. That's more of a warmer tone.
If you're going to walk away from the microphone, please take it with you so we capture you on the record. Thank you.
Can we ask a question about this?
We will in a moment here. Let her
Okay.
finish her dialogue here.
This is option 2. The last one would be the last one before that. One before, yeah. So this would be the option 1 palette. As you know, as you've seen, we've kept it a little bit warmer than the option 2. So the prominent colors would be this one, being flax. So this color would be covering the buildings that face the interior to the car parks, and what do you have, the cement tile wall? Building B, that we have the cement tiles.
Adam, is it building B elevation?
Not there?
Why don't you show one of
Okay, yeah, just show me the view so that I can explain it to them. Yes, the one before. Yeah, go back a little bit so that I can show them the change of colors. The view, the renderings that we went before. A little bit back? Yeah, so this one. So as you can see, all these would be prominently covered by the color called flax. It's written behind the cement tile.
All right, so point of clarification, then we have in our hands 2 boxes. One is option 1, one is option 2. We have 4 paint chips in each box, and then there are 6 color samples in
Yes.
here. So please clarify what the paint chips represent and what the color tile represents.
Yes. So at some places we're using cement tiles, like for example in the walls that are around the staircases, and on the front wall that faces the car park on both the buildings, and on the sides we use cement tiles, and on the rear of both the buildings we use stucco. So that we give the same finish, but not the cement tiles, in order to equate the cost and just, making it more efficient. So so the option 1 has, the flax is one of the major colors, and we also have textures because we wanted to show some depth and not keep it simple, because as you see the surrounding, you have more nature, and then there's a lot of textures that you see. So we wanted to replicate that a little bit and show them in the elevations.
Right, so to clarify, each box has 3 rough samples and 3 smooth samples representing the different surfaces you just described, but they're in the same 3 colors.
Yes, so
Okay.
those, so in order to not keep them too noisy, so in the panels, we're gonna alternate between these 3 colors in the whole color, throughout the building. So the stucco is what you're looking at, the paint swatches. So they're gonna be stucco, so they're gonna be painted on. And you can see the white in either option, the stucco, that's going to be the shaker. That color would be given on the windows, so just to give us a pop of colors. As you can see the white has been shown here just to show us a pop in color. And so could you show me other images? Sorry, I haven't started about the option 2 yet, so.
Oh, okay.
Are there any other views on that? Okay.
So these are the same colors with different
Can we ask one more
Right.
clarifying question right now?
There's flax that she was talking about. It's the cement that looks like Bill Jack told.
Here's what I'm not clear about. So this is building,
Option one,
There's
option
two
two.
different
Right.
proposals for
And she
texture,
hasn't
but the
gotten
color's
Yeah.
the same.
Okay.
Combination,
Right.
this is the
Well,
option.
no, this is going to be in part of the building, and this
This
is
is
going to be
option
that
one.
checkerboard
Okay.
thing, which I'm going to fight.
so it's switched
Both of
which
them
side
are
it was
for the
on.
checkerboard.
What's moving on the left-hand side to the right-hand side? Okay.
Both these tiles are for this checkerboard. What they're talking about, but it's just giving us an option of different textures.
I think it's being alternated.
It's all on the same facade.
I think that's,
They're just kind of breaking it up.
I think that's
Yeah.
what she's saying.
This is going to be in the back, stucco. This is going to be those overlapping tiles,
Yeah.
the Jack
Okay.
Tar look.
So I hope you guys can pull it together here to help us out with this. So option one, we have these color plans in front of us, page one of which has some labels on it for color that are not legible.
Yeah, so that was just to show you that how the process that how we worked and brought this to illustration. So I think I would suggest you would just look at the views because they're not to color, they're not real color. So if you could just look at the views in the final sheet, that would be great. Yes.
You're talking
These are
about the
just-
plan set here,
Yes.
and the
Those
labeling
were-
is here for
Yes.
some of this, but the clarity that these 4 pages you provided are better than the plan set. So you have half a page of color here, and then this page has some colors on it representing the concrete tile.
Yes.
So this back of the hotel would be stucco colors, and the courtyard would be tiles.
Cement tiles.
Right, okay. And I see the different locations of the materials, but I'm going to let you zero in on this and explain it a little more, please.
This is option one. Option two is
I
core.
have a picture here that unfortunately I cannot show you the right option.
Option one.
So
Warmer tone.
we do have the screen option of the colors that are painted on the building there. I don't know who can get
Not
back
for
to that
building B,
screen.
though. This building B is the one that I have here.
Yeah,
Oh, that's this.
So-
Building B has the difference between one
Yeah.
and two is the lighter bluish, light blue color. That's the difference.
okay.
It makes it a little cooler. The option two is a little warmer, but the basic colors, which is what we call
That's the-
flags.
Flags, prominent colors.
They're the prominent colors. There's only one color that plays around.
So let me back up here a second. This represents warmer colors in option one, and that's on
Yes.
the left-hand building on site there, or the eastern building, that's painted in horizontal stripes. The photo you're showing me has, on the western building, 2 options, and you're saying the right hand is actually option 1?
He reversed them.
So yes, what we've done is on building A, on the building that's on the right side, we've just painted the swatches. So just to give you an idea about palette 1 and palette 2. On building B, we've painted the color panels as to how it's going to look if I put all the color panels together. That's how it's going to look on the staircase well. So I have put both the options on both the walls. So building B, you can see option 1 panel on one side and option 2 panels on the other side.
Okay.
So just,
Two is on the right.
Sean, in the packet, I'm going to ask Sean a question. There isn't a picture of that building A in your photos.
I
Is
did
there?
not include that as part
Okay.
of my presentation.
I have a picture of it.
I know, I do too, but
Yeah.
for the public and what we're looking at, you know.
Carla, you can let them know which one is option 1 and option 2 from that
He
picture.
said it
yeah,
backwards,
yeah.
too.
Go ahead.
yeah. So can I give it to them?
Sure.
So in the building B, this one would be the warm, the option 1 that I'm explaining it to you.
Okay, so
You can see it's a
switched
bit
from being on
warmer.
the left-hand side.
It's
with
on the
this
right.
to
Left-hand
being
side,
On the right-hand
on the
side.
left.
Okay. Is that,
All right.
Warm and cold.
yeah.
So I'm just going to tell you that we're going to have to ask for this in a form that can become part of the record, because this is not adequate for the record or for the public to view. So I'm warning you about that now. So
But he reversed them.
I think
This is
that when I look at the photos of the eastern or the western building, that it appears to me that the right-hand building, as you say, then is option one,
Yeah, the right is option one, yes.
right? And the left-hand side of the western building is option two.
Is option two.
Okay.
And just one more question. Are the colors themselves are just supposed to be representative, right? Because they're, this mosaic is supposed to match with these tiles that you handed us,
Yes.
correct? So like this color is the baby blue color?
This color
Okay.
is the baby blue,
This color?
yes.
Okay. Which looks nothing like baby blue in
Yes,
person. Okay. I
we've
just-
tried to match the
best
paint.
you can, yeah, understood. Okay,
The paint store did the best they could to replicate.
understood.
All right, so we've got a better handle on where the colors are on the buildings on site and what these represent here. What else do you want to say about that?
I didn't understand your question, could you?
So what else do you want to describe about these colors now that we understand where they are on the buildings on site?
So about the option one, so basically we went with the idea that we're gonna give two options. One is going to be a warm tone and one is going to be a little bit cooler with a pop. So that's what we went with, but at the same time we didn't want to choose a jarring color that stands out. So we've done the best we can to mute down the colors, at the same time show a little bit of difference. So that's what we went for this time.
So your preference, do you have a preference for either one?
Well, to me, I really like the cooler one. Why is that? Because when I see it in a building, it gives me a sense of like a hotel. Like I feel comfortable seeing the colors, because if it's warm, it's going to just merge with the background. But I like the cool a little bit more than the warm one.
All right,
To me, yes.
thank you for saying that. And Mr. Mora,
Yeah, I'd just like to add that
please take the microphone. Thank you.
the colors that you're looking at, the panels that you see, the sort of mosaic called, is only happening around the stairs of Building A and at the end of Building B. So it's not happening everywhere. It's sort of like an accent at a certain location. It's only here. When you turn the corner from the face of the street, this is solid color. You turn around, and the stairs, we wanted to give a more personal feeling to a person walking up the stairs. Also, these panels are divided into two. Some of them are by the color, not only the colors, but there's a texture. If you look at the samples, there are samples with a little bit of a texture. So when you're walking up the stairs, you'll see the texture, you can touch it. It's a feeling of a personal touch of the building. And the same happens at the end of Building B. Yeah. So there's a texture, there's a color, and there's a softness to it.
Okay. So then the courtyard where the units are is primarily a stucco finish in there?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It's smooth.
Not the concrete panels?
Yes,
right?
but the windows, of course, have a trim, a sash. There is a different color with an accent that plays with the other colors.
All right. So what else would you want to say about what the changes are that you've made or what the additions have been to the project?
Well, one of the major changes is the roofs. We spend more time doing design, and we split the roofs. So this is now a little lower. Also, we divided the panels into a more coherent set of joints. As you see, the joints make more sense now. They're all spaced in a better way. And just a note about the sign, we were waiting for the colors to be worked out before we moved to this color of the sign itself. And that shouldn't be any problem. We have a very good sign consultant that is working with us, and he can just easily change the colors.
So on your comment about that, it's a green sign now with a sort of orange-yellow sphere in the top of it. So based on these colors, what are you thinking is a match to the colors, or what are you thinking would be the change for the sign?
I think we could pick the brightest colors from the palette that we have and apply them to the sign, because the sign needs to stand out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The roof panels are also painted a different color depending on the color scheme, is that correct?
Yes, if I go back to the drawing that we had, let me see the actual paint that we had.
So, yeah, there you go.
No, that's another one. This one, okay. This is the color of the roof, the top color of option one. And on the other side, the other half, the top color represents the roof color. So that's a metal roof. So
Metal roof. All right.
it's a darker color, yes.
That said, we're going to turn it over to the other commissioners in a moment here to ask you questions, but I'm
Sure.
going to go ahead and ask you then, if you're putting solar panels on the roof, which the plans say you're going to do, and the elevations do not show what solar panels look like on the roof, how much solar array is going on the roof, and what will that look like on the roof?
I think that should go under a different permit, both for planning and building, because solar panels these days come in all sizes, and there's new developments as to the cells and to the size of the panels and the color and everything. So I suggest and I ask for an opportunity to do that under a different permit, for both for planning and building.
Gentlemen, is that viable under a separate permit, or do we have to take it back before the commission? You know,
This is, actually, I'm not sure if you had spoken to Phil about this or Sean previously, but this is the first time actually hearing about it, so.
I got it.
I think it could definitely be a condition of an approval that they submit an application for the solar panels, being that the point is to get solar PV on the roof. If it's the desire of the commission, though, that you want to see what that looks like, that could, generally that's an over-the-counter permit under the state requirements. But perhaps they could give you some sense of the different varieties that are out there that might be placed on the roof, if that what the commission would like to say.
All right, thank you. All right. That said, there's a couple other things that'll come up. If the other commissioners don't ask, I will ask. So now that you're both up there at the podium, you have the microphone, I'm going to start with Phyllis and see what questions she has for you.
Sure.
Questions or comments?
Questions.
Both?
This is questions right now. Then we'll ask for public comment, and the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut or respond to any of the public comments, and then we'll go into discussion.
Okay. Well, one is, and I realize it's the water district, have you worked with the water district about having a gray water system?
We do have a layout that was prepared by an engineer to recycle some of the gray water into the water that is supposed to be used for irrigation. So we have civil drawings that were prepared for that.
And the hotel as it now exists shows that there's an air conditioning system. Is there going to be an air conditioning system in the new building, in the renovated buildings? Because it
Yes.
doesn't show on the plans.
Most likely, and this is to be discussed with the owner, is the rooms will have individual units, possibly one of those that you don't see that prominently on the wall, and that will be through the wall, or we can explore something new. There are new systems used for hotels specifically that provide heat and ventilation and air conditioning.
Is there any reason why, when we've asked some questions, go, well, there's some other plans, like you mentioned, for the gray water system, why we don't have a set of plans that includes everything?
I think they're here. The civil drawings are here.
Well, you don't have the solar panels, you don't show the gray water, you don't show the air conditioning, so I'm just wondering why the plans don't have all these things. Normally, the plans we see have all the components.
Usually, and the way usually we handle projects is this is the design phase, and during the construction documents phase is when all the equipment comes into place. The structural engineers come and provide their drawings, and we do the development of the drawings and the details. So I would say this is part of the construction documents to provide the mechanical system. We have a mechanical engineer that will come and do all the drawings for the mechanical system, and they will have to be approved by the city, of course. And the same with the civil engineers that we have for the gray water, and the panels for the roof, the solar panels. We will have to have a manufacturer provide us with what they would like to supply on this particular roof facing a certain side of the sun, and to be able to get the energy. So there are all kinds of variants that at this point are difficult to answer, and they come during the construction documents phase, usually.
Well, we usually see the solar panels in this phase, so that's why I asked, but that's all the questions I have right now.
Thank you, Phyllis. I will follow up on what you've pointed out. Dr. Bundy?
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that the roof has been articulated. It still is long and somewhat unbroken, and I know Michael Harlock commented on that last time. Is it possible that some small cupolas could be installed at the peak where you might conceal some of the roof vents to, take those roof vents out of there, but have several, 2 or 3 cupolas along the roof ridge to really create more interest in the roof line? Something that would have louvers on it, but would also be standing metal seam.
We could develop a couple of options to do that,
Okay.
yes.
I would think that would
But we'll
add
be
to it.
exceeding the limit, the high limit with the cupolas.
I wouldn't see a cupola more than 2 feet tall, is what I'm
They
asking
usually,
about.
they're usually taller than that because we need to flash the roof. We need to flash the walls of the cupola. It might be 4 to 5 feet above the limit.
Huh. That would be interested in seeing that explored. The other issue on Building B, on the west side, you have no windows at all on that side, whereas Building A on the east side, the back side of it, does have windows. I would think having windows would make a more interesting look along that really blank back of Building B.
Building B has a 5-foot setback in the back, and I'm going to show you if you have a, let me see, floor plan of Building B. Well, Building B has a distance of about 5 feet from the back wall to the fence. So essentially, there's no view of the building from that side. The owner chose to close all the windows there for security reasons, because he felt that anybody can walk and disturb the privacy of the residents. So, and also there's a fence that is almost 8 feet tall in front of that wall. So the wall, as it looks like a blind wall. We painted it in a way that is interesting to make it look nice, but essentially it's not displayed at all.
Well, you have windows on Building A, on the backside of Building A, and it's got the same situation from the standpoint of a parking lot alongside it, without really much of a view, but I was thinking of getting some light and just having some windows that would create a warmer sense on the interior of the rooms.
Most of the activities against the back wall of Building B are bathrooms or kitchenettes or closets. So any opening would be hard to put in there. Building A on the other side is a two-story building, and the next door building to Building A on that side is further away. It's a driveway away. And there's no fence, there's just trees. It's a different situation of Building A.
I guess it's lost on me. I don't really understand that, given that Building B with the fence, and then there's landscaping, I think, with magnolia trees there, and then a fairly big parking lot to any other, to the next office building over there.
Building B, I don't think there's any landscape, Commissioner. The Building B has a very narrow setback,
No, the landscaping is on the other property, but it's against the fence, and there are a number of maturing magnolia trees that are along there that I would have thought would have made somewhat of a nice view looking out there towards the west.
There's an 8-foot fence there that practically covers everything. But we can look into it, but again, that's a decision of the owner to have those windows that were there, to close the windows for privacy and for practicality.
Okay. I had another question just on the pergola that you have for the seating area in the back. It looks quite nice, although I thought that the 4x4 posts that support it seemed small and inadequate in relationship to the size of the structure and some of the other 2x6 and 2x8 beams that you had on it, and would ask, would 6x6 posts be more appropriate in that setting, or create a better look, the right amount of bulk to it?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good comment. Thank you.
Okay. So the big issue that I had before was trying to get an understanding of the floodproofing issue. And Gary Hall was kind enough to send me a reading list that I took to heart and really went into a deep dive on FEMA standards. And the thing I was having trouble with was why we were looking at non-residents' FEMA standards when I saw this as a residence. We've dealt with the Corte Madera Inn, which has base flood elevation 11 feet, and that's where their threshold is. And I thought that would be the same thing that would be required here. I really had to search in there, but did come up with what the definition of a non-residential motel is, which is a motel with 4 units where guests stay for less than 6 months. If they stay for longer than 6 months, it's a residence. This is FEMA. I don't think we can totally understand FEMA, but that's what they say. However, in going into it, I sort of question why the recommendation to do the floodproofing the way it was, whether that's really in the best aesthetic and economic interest of the owner and the best interest of Corte Madera. The FEMA documents state that if you're going to dry floodproof a building and there's active floodproofing involved where somebody has to be there to close those doors, secure those doors, make sure that there's not going to be any water entry in the event of a flood, that you should have up to 12 hours warning that this is going to happen. And I think in a river situation where you've got rainfall and the river's starting to crest, you may have a day or two of warning before this happens. But FEMA did not recommend dry flood proofing if there's less than 12 hours warning, or if there could potentially be a problem with someone being there to secure the doors and to get the occupants out of the building. The FEMA recommendation for dry flood proofing on non-residential buildings is to make sure everybody's out of the building if a flood is coming. So something like that would be disruptive to your guest, and FEMA, is also not recommending it if you have less than 12 hours warning. I think the the flood walls create some aesthetic problems. They create some difficulty with parking. You've had some issues there. And I think from a business standpoint, the owner should really think, is this what's going to happen if, in the unlikely event, a flood happened? And Corte Madera is different than a river environment in that we're protected by levees. These are not FEMA-approved levees, but they've nevertheless worked since the 1982 flood that we had here. And they also have done a lot of engineering from the standpoint of pumping to keep the watershed from building up and flooding as it did in '82. But if something failed, if a levee failed, there could be a sudden flood with certainly maybe only a couple hours warning. So I would think that as the owner, that should be taken into consideration on that. The other issue was the wet flood proofing on Building B. And in general, wet flood proofing is, as Sean mentioned, designed to allow water to enter the crawl space so hydrostatic pressures are equalized and the building doesn't collapse. And usually that's done when the base flood elevation is raised to 11, so you have your building itself protected. FEMA always recommends in new or substantially remodeled buildings that elevation should be, your first choice in trying to protect the building and mitigate from the effect of flooding. Gary has proposed putting the vents in the crawl space as well as vents into the building, which means that in the event of the flood, the guests that are there are going to have anything that they have in there inundated with water, and the building is probably going to be out of use for months while the damage from that water is repaired, to the lower foot or two of the building itself. So I would think from an economic standpoint and the ability to have a building that is going to be protected from flooding, you would really want to think about raising the building and have that base flood elevation at 11. One of the other reasons that for doing that is really public safety and the safety of the guest of the hotel. If the guests are taken care of, that's one less building that the fire department and police or the disaster teams have to deal with. So this would be my thought, to work with your client to really discuss what's in the long-term best interest of the proprietor and think about that in relationship to the guest and to the town of Corte Madera.
Before you get into that, it's a long response probably needed and requires your response and the owner's response. I would just ask Bob to say if he knows what our requirements, how are requirements different from recommendations, and how are they administered by FEMA, and how does that affect the building, et cetera, insurance, if you had anything that has been entered into the record for that. If you have anything that says, this is what FEMA says you have to do, and has a consultant offered that up?
Well, I think, Gary is correct that technically you can do these things. These do not seem to be FEMA's best practices, and they do comment that in building, I think with dry flood proofing and wet flood proofing, as he is proposing for Building B, where the threshold is not elevated, your flood insurance is going to be greater than if you had elevated the building and had the usual method of wet flood proofing on that. So the going deep into FEMA, there's a lot of discussion about what is best, what they recommend, and then there's this technical issue that is what they will accept.
Got it. All right, so I'm going. You can directly answer to Bob or us, but what I'm hearing is simply, really, what is your design? What does the owner want to do, and what does the owner want to stand by? And in this case, Bob's pointing out valid concerns that we would have as a commission or the town would have, and you guys have to respond to that, and we'll consider that as part of our set of considerations.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm not sure if all of you know or not, but we've been working on this project for past 5 years, maybe 4.5 years. Initially, we've consulted the consultant who's expert in this flood proofing. Based on the comments and concerns we've got from them, we maybe didn't go into more details as to what the town of Corte Madera really was looking for in that sense. We went ahead and spent our good amount of time, money, and energy behind getting to this point where it is FEMA approved. Our consultant says this is a standard industry standard. I understand that may not work with the town of Corte Madera again, but at this point right now, we're not really ready to lift this building up, the building B especially, and if that happens, the project will obviously take a different route, and I'm not sure what the town will allow in terms of maybe a minor renovations or not, but currently I think our application will have to go forward with or without, whether it gets approved or not approved, but I think we propose what is currently FEMA approved plan is.
All right, got it. So they're pretty much saying, Bob, that they've
Yep,
got it.
I hear
in-
it. I hear
in
you.
Paper, right, and then Mr. Bracken has to issue his agreement with this as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll just say, Bob, since Commissioner Bundy raised this point, which I think was a good point, staff has started to investigate further into this issue, and it is more complex than I think we had anticipated or would have hoped, given one would think that hotels are frequently located in FEMA flood zones. That being said, I think our approach at this point is to further get clarification ourselves at a staff level, using the building codes, the FEMA requirements, reaching out to other experts in the field, other cities and jurisdictions that have also faced this issue, and ultimately make a determination as to whether or not dry flood proofing is allowed or permitted in this area, both from a FEMA flood insurance perspective, but also from a health and safety perspective. And I do think that's something that is within the purview of the town's public works and ultimately the building official as well, planning and building department would make that determination moving forward. I would note that it probably makes sense from the applicants, perhaps on the applicant's side, to get that sort of determination earlier rather than later. And I will say they did come and speak to early on in the conceptual phase with the Public Works and Planning Department and all the different departments. And at that time, this issue wasn't really front and center in our minds from the town's perspective, but it is now. And I would say, we did try to craft a condition of approval in this resolution that would at least trigger that requirement. Right now, it talks more about FEMA, getting FEMA approval for this, but I think there's actually additional work that we would do to get comfortable with the idea. So I would suggest that either town staff, at the point at which we complete our investigatory work, come back and be able to report on that finding to the commission, and perhaps that could be a condition of approval that you look at on this particular issue. So that's sort of a heads up to the applicant that it's not sort of a closed item in our minds, but at the same time, at this point, I think there is a way on this issue, to move forward and still let staff sort of delve deeper into this and get back to the commission.
Thank you, Adam. I think we can sort of put that on the back burner for the moment. Dr. Bundy, do you have any other questions for these gentlemen?
Let me just add one other comment in regard to the sign. I think there's been some references that the colors need to change on that, and I think the sign that you've got on the building looks contemporary and looks appropriate, but this freestanding sign, still seems to say 60s Motel. And it seems like it just could be a little smaller, a little lower, and a little more sophisticated.
If it helps at all, we can remove the sign completely from the ground.
As a
That'd be
monument.
great. Or a much smaller monument sign.
No,
Would be
let him
fine.
remove it.
So,
Okay,
all
thank
right,
you.
so, monument sign. Okay, anything else, Bob? No, okay. Jennifer, your questions for these gentlemen?
I don't think I have any specific questions other than, I think as you mentioned, Peter, just having something that's very, very clear that relates to exactly the colors that are, I think we're still having a bit of a hard time getting our handle on all the colors. And when you're looking at the walls and there's 6 stripes, like just understanding, what relates to what. I don't think it necessarily has to be a photo rendering, if it's more like what you've put together in this supplemental package where it shows, the different textured concrete panels that you're using and has the exact colors there, or the color chips. I think that would be very helpful to us.
Is that the extent of what you want to
Yeah, I don't have any
Okay.
additional
Okay,
questions.
thank you. Mr. Lee?
Okay, so the first question I have is the stucco integrated color, or is it a paint applied stucco?
It's integrated.
It's integrated, okay. So on the topic of the mechanical units that will be maybe providing air conditioning at each, is that a unified system that they tie into, and so the vents are in centralized locations? Or does that mean that they'll be vented outside the facade at each one of the units under the window or something? Because then that would have an effect on the elevation and what we're reviewing.
Yeah,
And I
there's
think, I also think at a concept level, you can have an understanding of the mechanical equipment, its impacts on the design, without going to a construction drawing level.
So there are several options on the HVAC units, and I think we'll go with the options that does not interface or interfere with the current elevations. So like a split units, that would be going, the unit can be mounted on the back of the building, and have a split system that we can run through the attics.
Right, but you would, so my only question is, and concern is if there are going to be units that are visible from the outside of, say, even the back of the building, having some kind of understanding of that in the renderings or something would be useful. So that's why I asked.
Sure, yeah, we'll get the options out to the staff.
Actually, can I make one more question?
Yeah, just a minute. Charles, would you, is your mic on? And
Yeah, I believe hello?
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So then, my other question is about the solar panels. So we don't know exactly where they are because they're not depicted and it's in another permit, but, and I've heard about it being talked on the roof, but the roof is east-west facing, right? So do you orient the solar panels to face south, or do you lose efficiency by putting them flat on the east-west, or, I think I want to understand to some level what your expectation is, because you're putting a nice metal seam roof on it, and then you're going to cover them, with something that's really nice. But I think it's important to know. And then also, what I really wanted to ask is if you thought about not integrating them onto the roof, but doing other solutions where you integrate solar into the landscape or something.
I don't believe we have enough landscaping to put the amount of panels that would require. That makes really sense for the size of the building. A solar panel was or is really not a part of this project unless it's conditions from the planning, from the commissions. And again, if the solar panel is required or conditions, then yes, it will be mounted only. It can only go on the roof, basically. That's the only options we'll have. And that would change the elevation. And it's not our preference to have a lot of those panels on this is a lower roof. It's not, height is not there to really hide those panels.
Right. Yeah, I was maybe covered parking or something, but if that was an option. But.
Yeah, I'm not sure with the space availability if we can really make that work.
Okay.
We have, we're obviously, we like to see green things, and we have buildings that do have solar panels. In a lot of our buildings, this one was not a good fit for it.
Yeah, I have solar panels, so I'm a big fan. So, another question I had is, in my understanding of the part of the building that floods, there's a finish that's applied to it that allows, that's kind of wet proof, that allows the water to come up to it, but it's less damaging. Does that carry into the interior? Because I didn't see any interior elevations of the rooms or anything. If you have the vents, I think I had heard that the vents allow water to actually come into the occupied spaces, or is it only in the underfloor?
I think there's two different things. The one building is dry flood proofed, so on that one, in the rear of the building, there is as I understand it, but there is a sort of a finish that would not allow water to penetrate.
So that's just on the exterior outside of where the wall is in the front, and the wall.
It's the backside of that building A.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say building A is more like a bathtub, so that the exterior of it all the way around is flood-proofed above, and then building B, my understanding is that it goes through the building and
Under or through? So
through. So yeah, it goes through through the crawl space, and I believe through the units themselves.
And so is there, and so, is it that you can still, they're still plan on using plaster on the inside, say, and that would be damaged and that they would replace it versus, some kind of Venetian application where it can flood and then it's fine when it dries out, I didn't know if you had thought that out. Or...
No, it will be still a standard drywall and plaster and whatnot. So it will be a damage, and we go through to mitigate our renovation process or repair process.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Charles. Jennifer?
Sorry, I just had one other question that Commissioner Bundy raised. On Building B, why are you guys taking out all the windows on the rear elevation? Is it a safety issue, or is it just seems like your rooms are going to be really dark?
It's from the operational standpoint. On a majority of hotels, there's usually a one window that's faces where on the same wall as the door is. Just that's how the guests of the hotels usually feel kind of safe in terms of having not a whole lot of excess and whatnot. But other than that, there's no really a major reason.
Okay, understood.
Okay. A couple of questions for you. So, to start out with this solar description here, there are a lot of notes here that are rather boilerplate, but we take them seriously. So when it says in the plan, solar PV system, semicolon, solar thermal, which is supposed to say thermal, hot water system. So a PV array would be electric, or are you saying that the hot water has got solar panels on the roof, or what is on the roof, or is there something on the roof for solar panels for water or for electricity that's intended by these notes in the plans?
I think we have the intention of working with the consultant about the solar feasibility to provide energy and other things. But at this time, we have not pursued that seriously because we are waiting to go to the next step.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to say, and I will ask the other commissioners later, that I think that that's a part of our consideration is what does the building look like? And when the building has something like solar panels on it or a thermal system on it or air conditioning units sticking out the side, all of those things impact our decision about what does the building look like. In a building that's shown in the elevations without the impact of vents, mechanical systems, all of that is something we have to ask, where is it, and what does it look like? And without that, we can't make a good decision. That's my view, and I'm going to ask the other commissioners about it as well. So I want to know personally, what do they look like? It says here you've got 5 air changes per hour for the bathrooms. So those are vents that are going to be on the outside of the building. Where are they? I don't see them in the plans. If you have AC units that are hanging on the outside of the building, they need to be shown, at least conceptually. It's part of what the plans have to show. When it says mechanical system, existing heating system to new areas as required, I don't think there's going to be anything left of those existing heating systems that are in there. So, let's get real, guys, about the plans. You know, what is going in those buildings? It has to be shown when we see it. So that's said about those elements that we don't see. And then when it comes to the colors and Jennifer's request for it and so forth, the tiles and the colors and the mosaics really need to be represented to us and for the record in a form that doesn't require passing of boxes, right? The submittal requirements say 11 by 17 sheets. You've got the original one over there that has the old blue colors, but we're sitting here with boxes of colors and some drawings that don't really show what's happening. We don't get it, and the public has to comment on it too. That has to be part of the record. And I'd like to see it, and I want it clear for myself. And if we're going to approve something, we have to see that, and it has to be really explainable. It's just missing. When I look at the lighting plans, there's one fixture that is a glass fixture with a piece inside of it in front of the fixture to block the bulb.
Would you say the page number when you find it?
Yeah,
Peter,
I'm looking
please?
for it right now. It is page A 1.4-LL. It is the Midtown Short LED sconce, number 2724. And I can't find it on the electrical plan as to where that is in the building. Is that in front of every unit? Or where does that, where's that located?
So you can
So
sheet A1.4L has a light schedule on the top of the sheet. That refers to the units here on sheet A1.4LL.
Right, and I couldn't identify that brand with one of the ones that's on that schedule.
Which is a brand, excuse
It
me?
says Sonneman, it's called the Midtown Short LED Sconce, number 2724. So there's no key on the lighting products page that goes back to 1, 2, 2.1, 2.1, 3, 4, 4.1, 5.16. They're not identified on the products page with the schedule, and I can't tell exactly where they are, except that I.
Those are the wall sconces in front of each, right next to each door.
Uh-huh,
Those are the
okay,
sconces.
so there's
Yes.
essentially 22 of them.
Yes, for
and,
the rooms, yes.
That are going to be there, and it's a frosted glass shield, and I understand that strictly speaking, a shielded bulb, this might conform, but those glass lenses are going to be quite bright, and I would
And also
ask
doesn't
for
show-
a more compliant fixture for that. That would be my request for it, and I would ask the other commissioners to chime in on that.
It also doesn't show on the plan, Peter, in the drawings.
Yeah, there's some,
Yeah.
there's,
They're on the previous sheet there. All those little circles by the doors on the floor plan.
so, it says wall sconce, and it, yeah, 4.1 wall sconce does not reference to the product page, so I can't tell where they go, you know, so there's
If you-
not, the plans aren't referencing the products on page A 1.4LL with the schedule on page A 1.4-L.
I think if you look at the mark, there's only one mark that represents a lamp. And if you look at the plan, that's the only one that represents a light.
All right, we seem to be having a issue of what is what and what is not shown.
Yeah.
So I understand your intent, but it's not represented in the drawings as I understand it. And I will ask the other commissioners if they get it. So do you guys have an intent for providing an EV charging space on the property? Do you know that if
I'm not quite sure that we have, I'm not quite sure we have provided that.
The plans also point to a gray water storage tank, and I don't see it in the irrigation drawings or anything in here. So it says in the specs that it's there, but that's the only place that it says that. And you indicated that that's something to be developed. If there's a tank in the ground, it has to be designed public, that's building permit stuff, but we could say we want that, but it has to be designed and shown in the plans eventually here. So I think I'm going to,
He's looking at the, right now, you're looking at the general notes.
yeah, I've referenced it, so, yeah, still going. The general notes are on AO.1 for your reference there. So we will talk about the signs clearly at another time. It's not part of this application. That's a separate sign application.
No, they are part of it. They're on this.
part of this.
It is, okay, we're not getting a separate one, all right.
It's towards the back, one of the last
It's
pages,
it's in
Peter.
there, but, so we would approve it as a part of the,
Yeah.
okay. So,
When do I mention the tiles?
so go ahead and ask your question about the tiles, Phyllis.
Okay, since you're willing to take out the freestanding monument sign, and Jennifer was asking about seeing the monument tiles, a mock-up of sorts, I'd like to make a suggestion, why don't you make it easy and just get rid of those tiles? I mean, it looks like something that was developed for the Jack Tar Hotel in 1960, and I kind of hoped when that unlamented hotel was torn down in 2013, we had seen the end of those type of tiles.
So I think that that's a commentary for us to consider.
Okay, I
and
mean, the
think we'll go-
checkerboard pattern does not
Right.
add
You're
to
talking about
it.
the mosaic.
Yeah.
You're talking about the mosaic tiles.
So,
What?
You said monument tiles, but you meant
No,
mosaic.
I said since he's removing the monument
Okay.
sign, how about doing the mosaic tiles too?
Right, okay, got it.
That's a commentary, and we can discuss that up here. So before we go into public comment, is there anything else that you want to add to what we've asked of you, or anything else you want to explain before we ask for the public input?
Yeah, I like to say this is a planning process to me, and most of these things are usually worked out during the design development phase. The next phase is the development of these drawings into incorporating the conditions of approval, of course, because this is what we're here for, to get your opinions and to incorporate your thoughts in a more detailed manner. And that's the next step. In my profession, we have the schematic design, the design of it, which is right now, and then comes the design development, and then after that comes construction documents and bidding and construction. So all these phases to us, are very clearly marked, but sometimes they blend into each other. And today I find that some cities are asking for practically construction documents for a hearing. And I would like to ask for the chance to do that on the next phase. But we need to get to that phase.
Right. Well, I think we'll talk about it up here as to what we would approve for the project conceptually. I don't think there's any question amongst the commissioners that the hotel needs to be redone and that it's basically a good project. But it's our job to make sure that certain things get included in the application, because when it's not, then the community gets very upset that they didn't see it, didn't know it, and we didn't know it, and it wasn't considered as part of the approval. So we've experienced that, we know about it, and we've asked for that clarity from applicants. So with that That's our position on it, is to get more clarity, and that you, as the architect, guide the process to a point where the plans incorporate more information. You know, at least have the consultants engaged to a point where they can say, that's a single-unit mechanical system in every room, you know, and you're going to have fans on the outside of the building, and you've got an electrical plan. Show some of that stuff, you know, because when you put it up in space on the building, and we didn't know about it, it's a problem. And these guys get in trouble, we get in trouble, the whole community is unhappy. I don't want you to be unhappy and the community to be unhappy. We want a successful project. So, that's where we sort of differ in your process, our process.
No, we have a responsible owner, and we are professionals. We are not going to give you something that is not decent or good looking or well worked out for the town.
In the eye of the beholder, right? Yeah. Thank you. All right. I'm going to now ask for public comment on this project. You have 3 minutes to speak. Would you please state your name and say what you would like to, please?
Patty Stolier, Casa Buena Drive. I had a couple things. One is I love the idea of getting rid of the monument sign. I think the sign that's on the building is certainly adequate. And in these days, most people aren't just driving around aimlessly and going, oh, look, there's a hotel. I think they know where they're going. The other is the Palms itself. I know that everybody who's a long-term person in Marin County is familiar with the Palms Hotel in San Rafael. And it has a reputation. So you might rethink that. And then the other was using palm trees, and they're certainly not native, but I mean, it's the whole theme of your project, so that would change things dramatically, just my 2 cents. And looking at it, I think what Dr. Bundy brought up is that there should be a little more architectural oomph, that it really looks very similar, other than the height, to what's there, not the bedraggledness of it, but the shape of it. And I wondered if there's a way to put up a split screen with current and proposed so that the public can see that. And I know that there are a lot of lighting requirements so that it doesn't shine on drivers, but people driving up Casa Buena have to deal with that light at Marin Joe's parking lot all the time, so please don't have any lights that shine on the drivers coming home in Casa Buena. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. There is no one standing up to speak after Patty. So, the applicant has had 3 minutes to sit down and think about what they've heard. I'm going to ask if you guys want to say anything else before we deliberate.
I understand we'll probably have to come back and go through this again. We're willing to make the changes that what we heard today in terms of comments and questions, concerns. We hope we can address all the way it needs to be addressed. We will obviously do as best as we can, including how we can design the roof line and how it would look from outside and whatnot. We hope, as just the way you do, obviously this place is in need of help. It needs renovation. It's been like this for, I think, a good 20 plus years. And I hope that you all will support this project at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So we'll close the public comment on this item, and I'll take it back up here to the commission. And I'm going to start with you, Charles. I'd like your thoughts on this project.
So my first thought is a response to Phyllis. I don't agree with the concrete tile. I think Madera Gardens, which is the adjacent neighborhood, was built in the 50s, and so was this hotel, and I think that it's part of the historical character and nature of the city. And so by refreshing and embracing it, that it isn't doing us a disservice or trying to move us to something else, but acknowledging it. And I also have seen a lot of new construction in the peninsula and the city and other locales in Marin County, and I think that it's conducive with design styles that are currently trending. And so I don't think that it's really out of favor overall for a architectural style that's in the Bay Area, whether it's totally conducive to everything that you see in Corte Madera and the small town feel that we try to keep here. You know, I think that's still up for discussion, but you know, that was my 2 cents on that. I do think, you know, wanting to see everything, the sconce is a good one because that does show up at every room and it affects the elevation. So that's something that I definitely would like to see in moving forward in the drawings. But I think that that's really all the commentary I have on it right now.
All right, I think that you had, brought up the mechanical issues, and I definitely I'll come back and revisit that. But when it comes to color, I'm going to take a poll with each of you, right? So what's your preference, option 1 or option 2, with this scheme that is in front of us now?
Well, I still think it's a little hard to evaluate because I don't think the paint, even though it was on site and applied, really reflected what I saw in the materiality. You know, I think part of my judgment of the cool was that it's a very bright baby blue on the building on site, and then when I see the tile, it's much more reserved. And so I feel like I'd like to give it a little more credence than I had in doing site observations. That being said, I think both of them, with the greens and the blues, are conducive with other properties around the area. You know, I think that the Pete's, I think that the multi-unit housing behind all have tones of lighter greens and blues. Even the Chase Bank across the street has a more prominent blue, mixed with brown tones. You know, of course, the town center has a lot of brown. So I think you can go either way on them. I do think that the client prefers the blue because of a subjective thing. I think that if we're really making a decision about color based on how the public's going to perceive it, of course, the warmer tone is going to be the more accepted. And in general, I tended to, on the paint samples, gravitate towards the warmer tones. I wanted to like the blue, but I feel like the baby blue was just way too, it just wasn't, there's no other example of it, and I just felt like it was a little unsophisticated for the overall palette that you were presenting. So I would say the warm tone right now is where I'm leaning.
Okay, well, we may ask you to reaffirm that more, certainly, but you're saying that you're not quite sure about the means of the decision at this point.
Yeah, I was saying, you know, I thought I had come to a conclusion in viewing the paint samples on the building, but then when I see the actual material samples, it put it back into question for me. So I think that that's part of the holistic delivery of the project to both the commission and the public that we're looking for, so that we don't get into these mixed questions, right? And whether the renderings accurately reflect it, or even paint samples, or the materials themselves, right? And I think the materials are really what speak to it. So a better mock-up and understanding of the material in relationship and on the same board as the elevation would be very helpful for me to make a final conclusion on that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Friedman.
I think that was well articulated. My understanding from their presentation was that the baby blue was not the accurate color, that it was what was in the tile box, just to point that out, because I agree that the baby blue paint was jarring. I actually would agree with your recommendation that I preferred the cooler tones. I didn't think that they were abrasive. It's a huge improvement from what you guys initially presented in the blue tone, and I do think that it adds a little bit of interest to the project. I'm also going to agree with Commissioner Lee that I like the mosaic tiles. Sorry, Phyllis.
That's
On
okay.
the, especially now that you guys have taken them off of the street-facing facades and moved them to more interior-facing facades. I think it is as you pointed out, very consistent with a lot of what you're seeing on the peninsula and other hotel sort of, renaissance of.
Right. And I just wanted to add, thank you for addressing me on that, is that it also helps with wayfinding. So because they're located at the stairwells and they're kind of egress moments and everything like that, it draws attention to the right places for wayfinding for guests, is another reason that I personally liked it from a design standpoint.
Okay. Jennifer, anything else?
So that's on the painting front, and I think we already talked about coming back on with a little bit more detail there. I will address a couple of the things. The signage, as we talked about, I have a strong preference for getting rid of the sign as it is, which it sounds like that's maybe across the board. And if you want to have another sign, have a monument sign. But I think if you could just go to the sign on the building, that would be preferred. And on the flooding issue, I'm going to defer to the recommendations of the flooding consultant and FEMA. And it sounds like the building department exploring that a little bit more versus I can understand the economic hardship that may cause the owner if we were to require or suggest that they needed to raise these buildings. So I'm not going to support that.
Okay,
That's all I have.
thank you. Dr. Bundy.
Yeah, I look forward to having you come back with more detail. I sort of lean towards the warmer, and one reason that I was sort of leaning towards that was a recommendation or thought of really trying to have somewhat of a green wall on the south ends of the building where there would be vines or vegetation that would be growing up on some type of trellis, not affecting the windows, of course, or the sign, but that would soften that. And if this dry flood proofing prevails and FEMA approves it in this setting, thinking about trying to do that as a green wall where you had creeping fig or something like that on it to camouflage it, because the aesthetics of it really leave a lot to be desired, I think. So those are my thoughts, and look forward to seeing what you come back with.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Phyllis?
I concur with Bob. I prefer option one, the warmer tones. And there's really no way to convince me about the mosaic tiles. I just find them very jarring. I didn't like them on the Jack Tar Hotel, and I don't like them on this either, even if it is the in idea of the year. It's not my idea. So,
Old school.
what?
Old school.
Well, they did it in 1960. I didn't like it then either. So, as I say, when they tore down the Jack Tar in 2013, I thought we'd seen the end of them. Now they're coming back to haunt me. That would not make me vote against the project. I just don't like it. And I'm glad to see that the sign is coming out, because it really wasn't necessary. If you had had entrances from both streets, then I could see, since you had the wall sign on one street, you'd want the monument sign on the other. But as I say, it's not necessary, and I would remove it. And I think the wall sign would, take care of letting people know that, here's the hotel, and to see it. And as Peter said to me one time when we were discussing another hotel, that the days of people driving along the freeway looking for a sign to say there's a hotel is kind of over, that people look online before they get started and they know where they're heading. And I would like to see the drawings showing things like the lights. And part of the design, when we approve it, shows what's on the building, what we're going to see on a finished building. It's not the engineering drawings we need to see what's going to be there. And I really hope that you'll come back showing how the solar panels will look, how the air conditioning units will look if they're separate units, and certainly the lighting.
Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Just one last comment, to follow up on what Phyllis said, that I think if you change the address of the hotel to Casa Buena, people are GPSing and plugging in. If you plug in Meadowsweet, you're just lost at the back of the hotel and not sure where to go.
That's a good idea.
That's a county title document that they'd have to change or choose to change that, right? If the property is addressed formally at the county and that's the property,
Not the town?
no, it's a county,
Might be,
address, I would believe,
might be worth the
property.
effort.
It's possible.
So, I don't know, I would ask staff to tell us whether that's a fact or not on an address of this property.
We've had requests for address changes in the past that we help facilitate. It does ultimately have to
Go to the
get
county.
through, get to the county, but it has, from time to time, we do receive requests for address changes.
Okay, so that can be done, initiated to the town.
Sorry?
She wants to communicate, all right, so.
A lot of that address changes in many communities and are up to police and fire for safety as to how they map the response and how they map the community, so that would be something for the applicant.
Yeah,
consider.
they're definitely, clearly, they're always informed of such changes, but,
Well, and in this case, I would think that the fire department would want to
Wanted
pull
a
into the
custom-
parking lot.
yeah.
Yet there is no entrance on Meadow Street. That's why
Okay.
it makes sense to
So,
Casa Buena.
Phyllis, well, I've got your attention here,
Yes.
and you're at the end there. We have conditional use findings, we have design review findings, and we have the sign permit, and so forth. So, we're talking about two things here. One is a set of findings that we have to look at, and the second thing is, if we're gonna ask the applicant to come back with revised plans. So, but I don't wanna send them back if we haven't been able to make the findings, right? And we're just gonna ask for a proper set of plans that shows all of this, right? So when you look at the design review findings, are you able to make the findings that fall into each of the categories? The conditional use, the design review,
What page is that, please?
well, it's on, it's right
It's on
after.
page, starting with page 6 of the
Page
resolution.
6 of the resolution?
I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry,
Five?
no, it's not, it's page 2. Page 2 of the
Sign
resolution, starting
permit, I
with
think, is
conditional use
6.
permit.
So, we've all been talking about various things, but when we go through the conditional use, I think that, is it fair to say that there's no issue with the use from your perspective?
Correct.
Okay. The design review talks about the general plan, specific plan, it talks about trees and vegetation, it talks about views. The structure, site plan, and landscaping are in scale and harmonious. You have some issue with number 5, development materials and techniques. The structure, site plan, et cetera, create an internal sense of order. Then number 7 is the maximum extent feasible. The project includes maintenance and rehabilitation and improvement of existing structures. That's part of the general plan to do that, so if you're on board with that. And then we have the design and location of signs are consistent, so we are saying that that is something we would ask them to change in this plan. And then there is the sign permit.
Like, when we speak of signs, are we speaking of the monument sign, the building sign, or both?
Both.
Well, and just to note, there are specific findings in the sign permit application related to freestanding signs, which
This is
theoretically,
the-
if that freestanding sign goes away, obviously
Yes.
that would have to be modified, and those would no longer need to be made by the
Right.
commission.
Right.
The other signs relate to the design review finding on the project, I believe. There wouldn't be a separate,
That does fall under the design review findings. on
exactly,
the
number
bullshit.
8.
Right.
yeah.
And so in that design review finding number 8, then the square footage of the sign is either as is, and that it's designed, it's at its maximum, or the architect has designed it to what they want. Is it at its maximum for the sign on the building, or do you know? because on many properties, we have a allocation of space based on size of street frontage and so forth.
Right, I don't believe it's that it as its max. I think it's within the.
So then it would be as designed, we would be accepting it as designed, and not sort of trade.
Trading that for that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
I mean, yes, that's up for discussion. And
all right. So you get where I'm going with this, Phyllis, is to say we want to enumerate what it is we want to see the plans to include and what needs to go into the application, but you're okay with the findings, essentially? Or you have a,
Well, as I've said in the past, they're rather amorphous and vague, so it's hard not to go along with the findings.
right, but I mean, you can object to some of the design elements.
Well, as I say, I object to the mosaic tiles, but I am an objector group of one.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Bundy, how do you consider the findings? Are you able to make the findings, or is there anything in these findings that you cannot make?
Overall, I'm in favor of the direction we're going. I have some reservations in regard to public health and safety in regard to the flooding issues, and I'd like to hear more from FEMA and what the staff comes up with.
Okay, so we can make that something that they come back to us with,
And I defer to you on that.
right? Jennifer,
Yes, I can make the findings.
all right. Mr. Lee?
Yes, I can make the findings.
Okay. So I'm going to rattle off some things here so that we would have a motion essentially to, out of this discussion, to ask staff for some specifics from the applicant and come back presumably to a date certain on this, unless you guys need to make it a date uncertain. So we've agreed that we can make the findings for the project. However, the plan sets are lacking, and I'm looking to my right and to my left, and if I say anything that you disagree with, I need you to tell me, okay? Because we're going to do this efficiently as possible here. So that in the plan set, the elevations of the building are still not labeled with the correct street names and so forth. I would like to get the plans brought up to a level of conformity that actually show what's happening on the site. It's a record set of drawings. It's what will sit in the archives and be argued about for years afterwards. So that said, a good set of plans that shows what the colors are for each elevation that we can read, and may not be representative because it's printed, but then you come back with a board that says, here's the options for color option 2, and I'm hearing out of, because I'm going with number 2 as well. So it's a 3-2 vote right now on option 2. So that's where it stands with the color board. So, and unless you guys want to still insist on option 1 brought back in a color board better.
I'd like to see both if
Okay.
that's possible.
Color board, like that, full-size, good painted colors in here with those concrete samples, et cetera, so that we can actually identify it with the building. 24 by 36, color prints on the wall with the colors identified. That's a record set of drawings. It'd be unmistakable. We've just agreed that the applicant has somewhat agreed that the monument sign would come out, and that would come off the plans, and that would alter the application, or the resolution at this point. Then we have the light fixtures. I would like the light plans to be correlated between the fixture list and the fixture list to identify where it is in the fixture schedule, so that they're all on board. And the one fixture, I think I hear consensus in the commission that those glass lenses need to be slightly more covered fixture. Mechanical equipment, if you're going to have vents on the front of the units or the backs of the units, show it. The roof itself has 0 penetrations right now. We know that every bathroom's going to have a vent or 2. There's going to be a vent fan. You're going to have solar panels on there. I hate not seeing that on a set of plans. And the mechanical systems have to be thought through so that there's some representation of what happens. And if you're going to do solar PV, show where it goes, shows what it looks like. If it's just on the east-facing roofs, great. Or if it's on the east building, east roof, and on the west building, west side, so that they don't see it from the courtyard, fine. But let's show it, please, whatever that is. Please indicate if there's EV charging space on the plans. And I think that, as Bob said, you know, if the mechanical equipment requires separate enclosures, you got to show that. Bob also brought up about the pergola having any larger posts. Do other commissioners agree with that, or where do you stand? Charles?
I don't have an opinion about
Okay.
the post.
Jennifer?
I'm also going to defer to the pergola expert who designs them.
Phyllis?
I agree with Bob.
Okay. I think that the posts need to be enhanced. Maybe it's 4 posts. If you look at the design of the trellis that's going in at the Cafe Verde here, it's a really nice trellis system. Please look at that. You guys have to come up with the flood-proofing documentation, and it's clear that the applicant wants to let the building flood if there is a flood. And so can Public Works sign off on this? Can we get a FEMA document that is definitive for this or not?
We will do our best. I'm not
Yeah.
certain at this point.
Got it. All right. So I don't have anything else to add at this point to what we'd like from the applicant for returning a date certain. Anybody else?
And I think that was
Okay.
a good summary.
Mr. Wolf? Do we?
Just in terms of the date?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend that it's not a date certain, given just some of the, I think we want to make sure before we bring it back another time that it's got everything that the commission has
I
really
would
requested.
understand that, yeah. So the
Still need a
I'll just say it again to you guys. It's a great project. We're behind it. It needs to get done. But we're in a position where we really have to have a good set of documents to land in the record and that we're done with. And then it becomes their problem. So, Mr. Lee?
Can I just add one? So as far as the what parts of the building are being demoed or replaced and what's new, moving forward, if you could make those more clear, because I think when it's just black and white dashed lines and overlaps of solid lines, you lose where the existing dashed walls that are being removed are underneath the new ones. So the clarity of the plan, you can either color code it or something like that, but it would be much more legible for us to understand the total extent of the demo work that you're doing. And those need to be clear for me to be able to really understand them.
I think that's a valid point, and I would wholeheartedly suggest that. There isn't a building section here in the set of plans, a
think
vertical
it's-
section.
Oh, vertical.
There's no vertical section that shows what that crawl space is and what the heights are of the units. Just helps us understand balconies, the roof lines, the interior room sizes, how much attic space there is, what happens up there. And you guys can then say, here's where all our mechanical equipment goes in the attic, don't worry about it. It's fine. So with that said, that was a mouthful.
Well said.
And then I would just recommend that you make a motion to continue the
Continue,
meeting
all right,
to date
so-
uncertain at this point.
Who will make that motion, please?
I'll make the motion to continue the budget and renovation project to a date uncertain. And do I refer to the list of things
I think it's a lengthy
It's not
list.
necessary. I think we,
Right.
it's all on the record at this point.
addressing
We
the
will-
list that was mentioned by the
Right.
commission?
And staff will go back, as we did this last time, and make a
Right.
very detailed list of all the recommendations here.
Thank you. All right.
Uh,
Second on the motion?
I second.
All right.
Okay. Commissioner Bundy?
Aye.
Commissioner Friedman?
Aye.
Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Vice Chair Metcalf?
Aye.
Chairman Chase?
Aye. So, thank you very much.
You're either.
You're on the road,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
let's get it nailed down, please. Thank you. So we'll take a little break here, please.
Thank you.
About a 7-minute break, 8 minutes. For the break, and thank you for being patient. So, 13 San Clemente Drive. Review and consideration of sign permit application to replace existing monument sign and highway-facing wall-mounted sign at 13 Clemente Drive. So, Mr. Bush,
Thank you. So you have a colored materials board that's being handed around here. So we have some more colors to look at tonight, as well as a cut sheet of one of the lights that we'll go into detail in just a moment. But wanted you to be aware that that's going around. So before we orient ourselves geographically, just a little bit of background. So this is, as you had summarized, sign permit application for the replacement of 2 signs. This is in the San Clemente Paradise Drive specific plan area. The specific plan has been in place since 1979. It's a classic. And so here we are, because that specific plan is in place and has specific requirements for going beyond the single monument sign that's out front. So we'll go into some detail here. So this is 13 San Clemente. It's bordered to the west with Paradise Drive, San Clemente to the east, and Highway 101 clearly to the west. This is in kind of an area of mixed different uses, various commercial uses. There's a sanitary district land, some Corte Madera public buildings. There's a CHP office, various real estate and financial offices, a storage facility, and the business that is the applicant tonight, which is a Trek bicycle retail location. Some of the history of that location, it was previously a Harley Davidson in the 90s, and then that was replaced with City Cycle, which was a bicycle retail store, and has now been replaced by Trek bicycles. Again, here's kind of another view using the oblique view from Google Earth, just showing the location in the lineup here. This is kind of looking west, just circling it. It is somewhat unique in this block in that it is a retail location, and many of these locations are more, as I had mentioned, kind of commercial or services, or San Clemente, the housing that's there. I can use the cursor here. That's just to the north there. So in so much that it is a retail location, it's quite unique here. There's a rental facility that's been here since the 70s, and there's a dog daycare and different businesses. But as far as being a retail location on this block, it's quite unique. Moving on here. So there's existing signage that would be replaced. This isn't adding to the number of signs. It's just taking the existing signs that are there, replacing them. In both cases, the area of the signage is actually decreasing. First, we'll look at the monument sign, just the existing conditions, and compare that to what's being proposed. This is looking south on San Clemente, and you're seeing the monument sign there adjacent to the entrance. And now this is looking north at that same sign. This would be replaced. As you'll see, the colors of the existing sign and the proposed are quite similar, which just further kind of speaks to the really very little difference between the existing scheme and what's being proposed here. It's just a different business, therefore a different logo and some different messaging. So here's a side-by-side comparison provided by the applicant of the existing and the proposed. This would clearly drop the height of the sign and the overall sign area. This is well within the specified sign area permitted under the specific plan, which I believe is 50 square feet for the monument sign. So you'll see one of the attachments in the packet is some of the select language from the specific plan that governs what signage can go on this property. And this is that one monument sign that is permitted. If you had a chance to review the specific plan, it does say that only one monument sign, that's the only sign that is permitted for this property. No other signage is permitted unless it specifically goes through Planning Commission review for an exception to that. It's not exactly a variance process, but specific unique findings have to be made that are specified that we'll go over in just a moment. So this sign is well within the standards for that specific plan. It would be internally lit, and there are further details in the plans that were provided. And we have a representative from the applicant here who can speak to those details should you have any questions that I can't answer. Again, further details using the existing base for the sign. Looking at some of the comparable monument signs for other locations along that same corridor, there's the San Clemente Place, the housing development there, again with the monument sign near the entrance. Here's the self-storage on San Clemente, just kind of comparing. One of the goals of the specific plan was to kind of create some uniformity among the design along that corridor, whether it was actual buildings or, both the buildings and the signage and the landscaping. And I think that over time, it has achieved that. As you go down that corridor, there's landscaping on each property. There's signs that are around that same size and in the same general location, and that shows really the success of the plan. And the proposal to change the existing monument sign for the proposed sign would further those goals and maintain that consistency throughout the corridor. So the second sign, the reason that this requires Planning Commission review, a sign like this would not typically require Planning Commission review, but because it's within the specific plan area, there are those specific findings that have to be made by the Planning Commission. So this is the existing wall-mounted sign. You may or may not have noticed it. It is, prior to this, it is somewhat set back from the street, and it is also, even further set back from Highway 101. Here is one angle where you can see it. It's actually, there are more locations from which you cannot see it than where you can see it because of the trees, landscaping, different buildings and businesses that kind of obscure that signage. So here's one from Paradise. This is to the west. Another from Paradise, positioned just so that you can see it between all the other elements there. And here is another. These are all courtesy of Google. Thank you. Shot from Highway 101. Again, it kind of shows you the relative size of the sign relative to what someone might see driving by on the highway. And again, if you're going 60 or 70, it's going to look even smaller. Here is the existing versus the proposed. One thing of note here is that this is, to staff, this appears to be an opportunity to improve the lighting. The current lighting kind of shoots up onto the side of the building and up into the air, presumably creating some light pollution and spilling over the edge of the building. With the proposal here, working with the applicant, they provided a downward-facing light that you can see. The cut sheet of the lighting that was provided are of the existing lights, but the location of those lights would change to help eliminate light pollution and glare off-site. Furthermore, because it is hard to tell from a simple cut sheet of the lighting and a rendering like this, what that actually turns out to be in the real world, shall we say. So there is an additional condition of approval that requires that staff verify that it does not glare off-site prior to giving final approval, prior to giving a final sign-off when it's been installed, should that detail need to be worked out at that time. Again, further details are provided, and the Color and Materials Board has been passed around. Again, just sharing the similarity between the existing kind of color scheme and the proposed. Again, so as stated in the specific plan, only the monument sign is permitted unless the additional findings can be made specifically. The other case where those findings were made and where there is a permitted sign is at the self-storage facility. They went through review, I think, in 2006 and got approval for a highway-facing sign. It's very difficult to see, kind of similar to the proposed sign on the Trek location that's under consideration tonight, but this was provided just from Paradise Drive, showing that kind of highway-facing, kind of southern-facing sign. So some of the findings that need to be made to approve that signage. Well, first, stepping back, so we kind of already discussed the purpose of the specific plan and the objectives there, and that was to basically avoid clutter, to provide some consistency through that corridor, and to reduce excessive signage. Clearly, this is quite a large building, given the step back from the street and the nature of the business. Having a sign that faces Paradise Drive and faces Highway 101 is of substantial benefit to the applicant, and staff does not believe this would create clutter or run counter to the objectives, the underlying objectives of the specific plan, as noted here and in the staff report. Just to call out the specific findings, there is, of course, the design review finding number 8 that speaks specifically to signs, as well as the unique findings that have to be made for the specific plan, that it would cause practical difficulty and unnecessary physical hardship, and that special circumstances are applicable to the property. These are similar to variance findings, but kind of written specific for the area plan. And that if exception is granted, development on the site will achieve the special purposes of the plan, and that's what we had just kind of spoken to, that it would maintain kind of those objectives and further that goal. So without kind of rambling on here, this is all laid out in the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the presentation or anything that you found in the report or did not find.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Commissioners, I'll start with you, Phyllis. Do you have any questions for staff?
No, I don't.
All right, Dr. Bundy.
No.
Ms. Friedman.
I've got a couple questions, Doug, about just illumination. And I apologize if this was in the report and I missed it, but what are the specific hours that it'll be illuminated?
Good question. We were just noting, I forgot to mention, there's a condition of approval that limits the hours of illumination from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay. So I'm assuming that's when it will be illuminated. And then, are other signs on San Clemente illuminated? Like the self-storage sign or the residence sign?
It's a good question. I'm actually not sure,
Okay.
but
Some of them
yes.
are.
Yeah, the existing signs at this location are illuminated.
And how does I apologize, but I don't know enough about illumination wattages, but so 6,500 kilowatts, I believe, is what it is?
So they provided
Kelvin.
Kelvin.
Thank
color
you.
temperature.
It's color temperature.
Okay. How does that compare to what's the current illumination level?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. Well, first of all, the lighting that's on the highway-facing sign would stay the same as what it is now. So
Okay.
I don't know. The color temperature is specified for that in the cut sheet, and I think it's 5,000 Kelvin, which is kind of like just a straight
You're
white.
talking about for the 101 facing sign?
Yes.
Or the monument sign?
The 101 facing
Okay.
sign. And so that's 5,000 Kelvin, and that's like kind of like the white you might see on the screen right now. It's
White,
not,
white.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And then the other sign, I believe, internally illuminated is 6,500, which, it's going to be diffused. It's internally illuminated, so it'll be diffused by the material that they use for the actual lettering itself instead of externally lit.
we'll have the applicant speak, respond to this
I will
stuff.
defer to a commissioner who knows more about
All right,
lighting.
Mr. Lee, any questions for staff?
So if it's internally illuminated, is the black portion opaque?
You put your mic on, sorry.
Put- No, you're not on.
They turned me off. So my question is, with the internal illumination, is it only?
Correct to
that-
staff right now, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it that the black material is opaque and that it'll only show through in the red and the white?
That's my understanding, but I think the applicant can speak to that.
Okay. Yeah, that's the question.
Okay. So, I don't have any questions. So, that means that it's your time to stand up and state your name and express what you want to about this application. Identify yourself, yes.
Hi, my name is Melissa Gann.
We don't have a microphone.
mic's
Just a
on.
moment, please.
Thank you, just, press the button on the.
Oh, guys?
There you go, that's on.
Oh, okay.
Thank.
Hi, my name
No.
is Melissa Gann.
No.
Shoot.
She can speak at that one, right? Can she speak?
They don't last through a whole
The
meeting.
one at the end? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Melissa Gans, and I'm here to represent Sign Tech. We're the applicant for our customer Trek, which is the bike company, and the sign people. And to respond, so I only have a few things. I think Doug has done a great job. We just wanted to, because we know that the monument sign has been permitted. Yeah, right. Okay, actually, all right, there we go. We know that we have the permit for the monument, so it's really arguing for the wall sign, and we just wanted to say that it is in this, that wall sign, our proposed is much smaller, and it's, it's not like we're making it bigger or using different lights. It's going to be the same. We put a cut sheet around so that you can see what lights they are. And then we're going to be having facing downward instead of now upwards. In terms of the illumination on the monument, yes, if we have the materials going around, you can see how dark. We want to keep the logo the way that they would like it, which is the black and then the white against it to make that pop. And so we don't really want the lights to brighten up the black. I mean, there's really no way to do that. And then kind of lose the whole point of it, which is to make it. And then it's interesting. I thought this was interesting that we're using exactly the same color palette, basically, that's already there. And then again, we are doing nothing to the base at all, and that we're just kind of making it a bit smaller here on top. And so we're just going to be changing the top of it.
So to answer Mr. Lee's question is that the black in this palette is solid material, essentially. So it doesn't actually radiate black light.
Correct.
So white is white, black is, black. Okay.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
No.
All right.
No.
No, that's all. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing as that there is no member of the public in the room, even though we can open it for public comment, we'll say that there's no public here to comment, and we'll close public comment with that. Commissioner Metcalf, can you make the findings for this?
Yes, I can.
All right, Dr. Bundy,
Yes, I can.
Ms. Freeman,
Yes.
all right, Mr. Lee?
Yes.
All right, I can make the findings. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve sign permit number PL-2017-0086 to replace the existing monument sign and highway-facing wall-mounted sign at 13 San Clemente Drive.
Second.
Commissioner Bundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Friedman,
Aye.
Commissioner Lee, Vice Chair Metcalf,
Aye.
Chairman Chase.
Aye. And then, Mr. Bush, would you read the appeal rights?
Following action by the Planning Commission at a public hearing or meeting, any decision of the Planning Commission may be appealed to the Town Council within 10 calendar days, and forms are available at the Planning Department, and a $300 filing fee is required.
Thank you, and thank you for being so patient to get to your item, so.
Did we make you nervous after the first applicant?
Okay,
Actually, she learned more about motels than she ever wanted to know.
so we might make it onto the line tonight. So, item number 6, Planning Commission Rules and Procedures, review and consideration of the proposed revisions and amendments to the Planning Commission Rules and Procedures. So, it says staff, so that means that Adam Wolf is going to say something about it.
Just very briefly, this came up at a couple meetings ago. Commissioner Metcalf had recommended we revisit some of the rules and procedures, and as included in and also requested that we put this on. I realize that agendize is not apparently a word, so I won't say that. But we agreed that we would put it on the next available agenda. That's tonight. Commissioner Metcalf, as you see in attachment 2, included some emails, correspondence to staff regarding some proposed amendments, and staff had really took those amendments and attempted to implement them in the correct locations in the rules and procedures. And so I've included a track changed version of the Planning Commission Rules and Procedures, which were most recently amended August 16th, 2016. In addition, I've given you sort of a correspondence from Commissioner Metcalf just noting in a list form what changes have been made and then what additions have been made, just for ease of reference. And I think we had also discussed some other potential modifications to this earlier in the afternoon with Commissioner Metcalf, but I'll let Commissioner Metcalf also discuss that. So other than that, there were a couple of other items as staff went through that it felt should be sort of clarified at this time. While we're doing this, we might as well clean up a couple of other items. In particular, I would call your attention to 2.2, which previously had talked about abstention from voting, and I think in looking at that, really was speaking about recusal in terms of the language, not abstention on, and then there was the reference to abstain is still in sort of that third sub-bullet of the first bullet in that section. And that was one of the things we talked about, and I think there were some other, one of the other things, just to note that staff in 2.2.3, we had, in terms of expected preparation, there was a change from making required findings in the fourth line to evaluate required findings, just to make clear that it wasn't, that's the real expectation responsibility of the commission, not that every time they review something they have to make the required findings, but it's really about the evaluation of whether those findings can be made. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have about this, but obviously this is pretty self-explanatory.
Under that, we
Thank you.
also
Yeah.
added the two subsections on 2.2.3.
No, there's lots of changes.
About setting an appointments, with the stakeholders, and
Absolutely.
then at an open meeting, letting people know that you've had a site visit, like with the neighbor or the applicant
Absolutely.
himself.
No, I think some of this stems from obviously some recent experiences, but actually clarifying and specifically spelling out that these
Yeah.
things are, protocol or procedurally allowed and accepted, and in fact maybe expectations. So
It's our practice that we're just putting it into writing.
distribution of materials, 3.4 was another section that got added to. and modified at least in the first paragraph. And so this is all, I think, intended to be consistent with code sections, but I'm going to actually stop there and defer to maybe Commissioner Metcalf if you want to.
So, yeah, Phyllis, do you have any?
Okay, yeah, there's
things you
more
wanna-
to it. Two specific ones. I'm going to do the back first, 6.1, which is the last page, 11. Under amendments, Adam tried to change it, and we played with it back and forth, so I just wrote it out separately. These rules and procedures of the commission may be revised, added to, or amended at any regular commission meeting by a majority vote of the commission members. Staff shall then bring these agreed-upon changes to town council for final action.
So I think you're mentioning that changing what has been included in here, which added a different sentence after that
Yes.
first sentence,
Yeah.
and sort of going back to your language in your email.
Yeah, letting, okay, and then the other one is, it's an addition, 3.3.4, which is the only addition. The others were amended and cleaned up, and that's under the section 3.3, other types of commission meetings. 3.3.4 says annual organizational meeting. The annual organizational meeting of the commission shall be held in connection with the first regular meeting of the Planning Commission in July. The specific business of this meeting will be the swearing in of new commissioners and the election and seating of the chair and vice chair. And then there are the references to the codes and the town ordinances. I mean, this, again, is a practice of ours, which is now going to be listed, so it's understood. There's one other one I'm trying to find that we discussed. 5.3.1, what was it? Oh, the other one, under the public hearing procedures, 5.3. And 5.3.1, each scheduled public hearing shall proceed in the following order. And after it, we added in the phrase, staff recommendations if applicable, and then commissioners may ask staff clarifying questions. And that would be before the applicant speaks. I mean, as I say, it's our practice that we follow, and we're just putting it in. That's about it, because you hit 2.2.2,
Yeah,
2.3,
I think-
2.3, 3.4, 5.3.1 we just did, and 6.1, we got them all.
I think the only other, so just to clarify, I think the request by Commissioner Metcalf is to add under other types of commission meetings, or an organizational meeting as in other types of meetings
Right.
in 3.3.4 with specific language that she just read. In that would facilitate another change to section 2.3 officers, which would then say at a special meeting held immediately prior to
We took that out.
to the organizational meeting.
No, we said.
We said at the organizational meeting.
First meeting in July of every year. We took out that section that you added, the blue writing, a special meeting
Right.
immediately prior to, we removed that. And we took out regular after the word first.
So it would be
At the first meeting in July of every year.
Okay.
See, by saying at the first meeting, it doesn't specify whether it's regular or special or any other kind of meeting. That's why we took out regular and just,
At the first meeting in July.
yeah. As you can see, Adam and I edited each other.
Okay.
Oh, the only other thing we changed is just for some reason, and I don't remember what, and Peter, you may have worked on this section with me, like under 2.2.3, we talked about adjacent stakeholders, which would have meant people probably directly next door for the neighbors, and we just changed it to affected.
We've had that discussion many times about whether it's adjacent or affected, and
Yeah, and so we just put in effect because that's what we've been doing. Because sometimes people who aren't directly next door are affected.
Can I make one comment? Since this seems to be impacting me more than anyone else about recusing yourself from votes.
I'm sorry, so
Oh,
hang on a
Didn't
sec
hear
here.
you.
I'm sorry, I'm back on 2.2.2 about recusal. And this is more just a logistics question, but.
Yeah.
So the bottom bullet, if a commissioner must recuse from a vote, the commissioner shall declare this fact. Could we also include that the commissioner or the chair could declare this fact? Because in certain cases where there's been meetings where the only agenda item was the Corte
Yeah.
Madera Inn, I was not here to recuse myself, or does that matter? This is a legal
So
question.
according to the Brown Act, I mean, it should come from the commissioner.
Okay.
And that would be the preference in the case of not only you, but in any case, it's either been staff or the chair that's actually identified why you were absent. But generally, it should be it was a message from you that you were unable to. So, I mean,
Okay.
it still comes from the commissioner.
Still
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
initiates with you.
usually that falls into place, like if there were 2 items on the agenda and the second one, then you would say you wanted to recuse yourself, give the reason and leave.
If you were here, right.
Right, but we've had the example of just that's the only
Yeah.
thing on the agenda and why show up.
Yeah,
if-
in that case, then it would just be announced by
The,
staff that.
Planning director has notified us
Yep.
of that
Yeah.
in writing from the commissioner.
Still
Okay.
coming
That
from,
works adequately.
still
It's
notify us coming from you.
Okay.
Still
That
comes
sounds
from you.
great.
right.
Yep.
I'll give you this so you can see.
All right, so you guys have made some notes over there of what these are. I know for those of you who are not involved, and it's maybe hard to follow, but
Yeah, I mean, if anybody else wants to hear that language again, please, happy to.
Yeah, you can hold on to that.
I did have questions, and I clarified with staff before the meeting, my questions.
okay, that's great. I would just like to say, before any further comment, I want to wholeheartedly express my appreciation for Phyllis to delve into this. It's a lot of work, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob, do you have any questions about this?
No.
Okay. Ms. Friedman, do you have anything else you'd like to
I don't.
query about?
Thank you, Phyllis, for putting
Yeah,
so much
you're
effort
welcome.
into this.
And that was a good point you brought up. I hadn't even thought of that one.
And Mr. Lee?
Nothing.
Okay. So they are amended then with specific comments that you've got on the record there.
Well, it would be, so by motion, I think you would make, by motion, you would make a recommendation to amend the Planning Commission rules and procedures and have staff essentially relay the proposed amendments to Town Council for final action.
There you have it. So who will make a motion to approve with the comments as amended so that
I'll
Adam?
make the motion.
Right. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, got to back up here. Got to open it for public comment here on this. So is there anybody here in the public that wants to comment on this? No, thank you, all right. Please, Phyllis, proceed.
Make the motion that we approve the amendments and additions to our policies and procedures and have staff bring it forward to the council for final approval.
Great.
Okay, Commissioner Bundy?
Aye.
Commissioner Friedman?
Aye.
Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Vice Chair Metcalf?
Aye.
Chairman Chase?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so, thank you again. So that's a new element, and also intended to decide tonight before the meeting that if it appeared there was a need, I would read the element about public
Yes.
participation, but chose not to tonight because it was not apparently needed, but
By the way, if I may add, and I don't know if I told you or not, Jane Levinson relayed to me in an email how frightened she was at that last meeting by that one woman who was, as Jane put it, out of control. And that, it bothered me to hear that from her because she is such a dear person and really participates.
okay, yeah, well, we've come aware of that. So, Phyllis, you are the reporting commissioner for last week's town council meeting.
And I'm trying to remember what was on the, I didn't bring,
Well, there was a lot on that agenda, including
yes,
the Crescent.
one, Anisha has left, and that is a great loss to our town. She got offered a wonderful job in Berkeley. And I'm sure we all wish her luck, but she is a wonderful, wonderful asset we had. She was one of the engineers who worked on the roads and these improvements we're now having on Tamil Vista. Got us wonderful grants. I've never seen anybody as successful as she has been in getting grants for our town. So
But there
she
was-
is a big loss.
There was a couple of contentious items on the agenda.
There was a hearing on, I can't remember the address now,
141 Crescent.
141 Crescent. There was an appeal of our ruling. And the interesting thing was that here we go through the whole hearing and the attorney speaks and what we usually see. And Diane first said, don't you think you could talk about it and see what you could do? And the next thing we knew, the applicant and the neighbor were in the back of the room discussing how they could work this out, and we'll be coming back to the council to let them know if they have. It was just pointed out to them, here, you're gonna have to live next to each other. And you'll see what you can work out. This was,
Didn't we point that out too?
yeah, they didn't listen to us, what can I say? This was the house, there was an addition built on the house, and the next door neighbors complained that it would block their view, which in reality was trees and had been trees for 20 years. And
So, well, the
it's
upshot
been
was,
worked out. It's being worked out, which is very nice.
really, I didn't get that. I thought they instructed them to get the story poles located in the correct
Oh,
position.
they're going to do that too.
Yeah, and then it would be brought back before the council with the story poles in the correct place and a review by the council members of those new story poles.
Yes. Yes, there was a question that one was off by a foot and one was, I think, a foot and by 18 inches, and one was a foot too high. But as far as the blockage and where the garage was located, and if it was moved forward or back, they were standing in the back of the room discussing it and trying to see what they could do. I mean, they looked like a bunch of nice people who just had a disagreement, and it would have been nice if they had done that before they did the appeal to the council.
Well, yeah, it took a lot of time to discuss all of it, and hopefully.
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
So was last town council also when you presented about, upcoming kind of considerations of the planning commission and how, like, selling the gravel, the city selling the gravel lot? Is
No.
that?
It was not that.
No.
No, not the last meeting.
But the other thing that was on the agenda was the zoning lot coverage, and Phyllis.
Yeah. Yes, we had voted to forward it on to the council, since they are the elected body that can make the zoning change, to increase lot coverage from .34 to .40. And there were a lot of questions from the council, which kind of surprised me that they had concerns, their concerns. But they wanted Adam to give them a list of some of the variances that have been allowed for people who've gotten more than .34, and that's going to come back to the council. And I don't know if that's the next meeting or not, if they said they wanted the next meeting. But I'm hoping when you do put down the variances, I vaguely remember there was a couple who came who wanted to add on to their house. The man had MS, and he knew that his mobility, he was mobile and everything, but he knew he'd be ending up in a wheelchair and stuff, and they decided to add on to their house now, and so there'd be, do the things, ADA type stuff, and I remember we added on, so I think that was a good,
We'll look for that.
an important reason to do a variance.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a long discussion, and I think Adam's on trying to come up with conditions of existing
Right, exactly.
applications and what.
Yes, I said they were.
That there are houses.
We'll
that-
come back with a few examples, I
Yes.
think.
And the only-
Whoever spoke to it, people did get up from the audience to speak to it, and except for one person, whomever spoke was supportive of it.
Right, and that one person said, well, this is going to lead to another increase later on. But
Yeah.
the bulk, the size of the homes the lot coverage itself will not invade the setbacks, and that was the primary communication that was tried to be made. And the intent is to allow people to put more square footage on a first story rather than a second story. So,
And do you want me to explain that other thing I brought forward about the guidelines?
yes, that was a public comment that you made.
Yeah, that was in public comments. That wouldn't be part of their agenda.
But the other thing was the development agreement that you brought
Right.
forth.
Yes.
So that was simply for the restoration hardware as you can explain it.
So it was procedures for any development agreement in the event that council wants to consider a development agreement. It's
Yeah,
for the
not a specific one.
Not a specific. It's not for any specific project, but just to establish rules in the process to move an application for a development agreement through.
So as I understood from the testimony there that, just gotten subpoenaed again, I'm sorry, so, that that it's actually been required by state law for 20-some years?
Well, there's a provision in
Longer.
the law that says if the town is basically requested, if the development agreement is requested by an applicant, then the town shall establish
right.
procedures.
Right, and we
And
haven't.
so it's been in there for many years, it's just that hasn't happened.
Right.
There's been no request.
No one's ever requested a development agreement?
Correct. As far as we could,
And any
back.
development agreement would have to be approved by the town council? It wouldn't be something you would do?
correct.
Just through the planning department?
State law requires that development agreements be approved via an ordinance, so it actually is an uncodified ordinance, so it's ultimately the town council's decision.
Interesting.
Okay. So I don't think there was anything else worth reporting on to you? No. Okay.
No, usually I remember I bring the
Packet.
it with me and I can go through it. I didn't this time.
I have it in my briefcase, but it's too big to pull out.
Oh, I don't mean the whole file, I'm just talking
Right.
about the table of contents.
Mr. Wolf, do you have anything you want to contribute to our knowledge?
No,
base?
I think you went over, we will be looking to bring the lot coverage matter back to the town council, I believe, on August 15th. So not the next meeting, but the meeting after. It may also turn out that we will be going back to the council with 141 Crescent at the same time, not totally sure. But hopefully not, because we are also planning on having the Marin Montessori application before the council on August 15th. So there's a lot sort of stacking up on the council's plate here in terms of planning matters.
I thought that was all, it was for August 1st that Todd was concerned about, that it was next week's meeting. He thought these things were coming up.
No.
So,
So there's that. Obviously, we have at the next meeting the Village at Corte Madera Restoration Hardware. It's a public meeting as it's described here, and we'll probably change the language a little bit in this description on the tentative agenda, but a public meeting, public hearing to receive comments on the draft environmental impact report for the Village of Corte Madera expansion project. So that will be the next meeting. We're not going to have this appeal, it turns out, at the next meeting. It was, but you can see that will be probably the meeting after, the second meeting in August, where we have an appeal of a staff decision to allow for a 7-foot fence, and one of the neighbors is appealing that decision where 6 feet is allowed.
Right.
So you will be weighing in on that application. And then finally, this just came out this evening, but you'll see that there was an article in the Independent Journal came out this evening on Amy's Kitchen proposal to locate over where at the former Denny's site. And in that, I mentioned that we are looking at a September preliminary hearing or study session workshop to review that. I know I call it we have to go back to my rules and procedures. What do we call it? It's a study session. So, but that's what that meeting will be.
You said the 12th.
I believe September 12th is when we're going to look to have that meeting. So you can, just a heads up, so that's sort of now out there in the interwebs and all that stuff.
It's on the dark web.
Why did it go away for a while?
Problems with the
Well, those are questions that.
Too much information, never mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of those real estate dealings are not always the cleanest, and who knows? I don't.
So just curious, study session will probably explain it all, but just, is it a replacement of the existing building, or will it be like kind of a modification? Are you aware
You'll
of
see.
what
I
their
mean,
intentions
yeah,
are?
it will be. We can't really
Okay.
get into the particulars of it. But I'm happy to, if
There's
talk
information.
to you.
There's information out there that could.
No.
It's
Actually,
in the
there's
article.
No, there's no specific plans that have been submitted or anything like that at this point. When we will get a preliminary review application, that's what we call it, from where they will submit materials that they intend to present for the study session in advance, obviously.
And that's for the September.
In that, where you will see exactly what, sort of the conceptual proposal is.
Okay.
But just in terms of what happens in at a study session, there's no action is taken. It's informal guidance based on information available at that time that you're providing the applicant, and a chance for the public to obviously comment on anything that they see, but no action. And I'm happy to talk more about that offline. There's some good examples in the recent past that the commission has heard, really Scandinavian Designs and the Aimco project. But with that, I'm sort of done. I don't know, Judith, did you want to mention anything about upcoming schedule? Okay, no. All right.
No, the only thing I would add that I forgot to mention is that next Tuesday night, is it? No, the next council meeting is,
Next
August
Tuesday
1st.
night, August 1st.
right, and that's the same night as Police Night Out.
Oh, yes.
Down the street here, so at the fire station.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that might be an interesting thing, where all the police are
Yeah.
there and so forth, and it's like from 5 to
5
8 or
to
something.
8, and the council meeting starts at 7:30.
Right. So, any case, interesting thing to go attend, if you're a local member. So, with all of that said, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All right,
Second.
adjourned.
Yay.